Okay, so yeah, we've had a few weeks, missed a few things, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. So let's jump right into it. And before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody knows, because we get people asking us all the time, and we were at the Line Haul Summit last week. People were asking us, so here we go. August 9th and 10th, we'll be having the Becoming a Successful Fedex Ground Contracted Service Provider session or seminar in Tampa. And then the one that everybody's asking about, we're going to start the first one August 11th, Network 2.0, which is what the executives at Fedex announced that is, that's the push for the next, it'll be today for the next 5 years. But what that means to your contracting operation, your business. A lot of people are calling it the most significant thing to happen in the transportation industry since Roadway launched RPS, those of you that know what that's all about. So you don't want to miss this. This one, the first one will be in Tampa, and then there'll be some other ones out there, and we'll let you know about those. Let's jump into today's agenda. Today we're going to have our usual economic update, and the voice of wisdom and reason. Those of you that know, Mr. Wade will be speaking to us. Then there's some things going on. What's going on? And then why a 50-cent a stop marketing stunt could be detrimental to CSPs. You're going to want to watch that, and then we'll have a discussion after that. So take a look at some of the economic news. So the June number, the inflation number, the CPI came in at 9.1%, despite people trying to talk it down. Yes, that's a new 40-year high. CPI, which is something that affects CSPs and is usually a really good predictor about what's coming, that was even worse. 11.3% in June, again, accelerating more than expected. So now you want a little bit of good news. Here's a little bit of good news. Looks like fuel is starting to drift lower. Hopefully this trend will continue. Still way up there, but it looks like it's starting to drift lower a little bit. That's good. But diesel is not participating in the whole drifting thing. So, okay, now, meanwhile, we've got our Secretary of the Treasury telling us, no recession here. Well, there is at UPS. They said they're shipping fewer packages. There is, when we do our analysis, those of you that we've gone through and done the business analysis, so to try to figure out if a renegotiation is something that is in the cards, we see the volumes backing up. So the question is, are your package and stop volumes falling? If they are, then you're already experiencing a recession. So it's not, are we going to have one? It's here, folks. It's been here for a while. Well, remember, inflation is causing your costs to increase, and recession is going to cause your revenue to flatten or decrease. Okay, so what we really want to talk about is what Mr. Wade's going to present to us here. There is a problem, obviously, but what we have to understand what's going on here, and so we can understand what to do about it, and who better to lead us through the forest here than Mr. Wade. So take it away, Mr. Wade.
All right, thank you. I know in the last week or so, there's obviously a lot of talk out there about possible ways to get help. Can this happen? Can that happen? And all like that. So we wanted to kind of take a look deeper into that to see what some of those options might be, especially from the CSP viewpoint, as well as how FedEx may be looking at it also. So before we even touch on that, though, it's kind of, if you look back over the last few years, there's been a groundswell that's led to a almost perfect storm type of thing, economically speaking. You know, we had COVID come about, and that made the e-commerce market just explode and grow years ahead of time. And that, of course, changed the way things were happening, because as that grew in 20 and 21, you're seeing your market mix go from the majority being business stops in many cases to now the vast majority being e-commerce stops. Well, FedEx sees that also, and they start to negotiate a decrease in revenue per stop, basically, because citing stop density and how that's going to affect the efficiency of your business and the gains to be made there and all like that. So you're now in the situation where you've got reduced revenue per stop via your contract, and now the economy, beginning at the end of last year, beginning this year, you start to see some economic inflationary pressures hit, and supply chain and other things. So now your volume starts to decline that way, and it brings you to present day, where you now have lower stop volume and lower revenue per stop while you're experiencing rising costs, which is the worst situation you want to be in. So that kind of takes us forward there. And, you know, again, it's something you've never seen before. And then on the other hand, you've got a business partner that is under its own pressure to produce improved financial returns to satisfy stockholders, Wall Street, however you want to look at it. So how does this work out for everybody? And if we can take a look. So there are a couple of things to look at. And first and foremost, and I think it's on a lot of people's mind, is recently a third-party person who provides resources and services to CSPs, but also as a CSP themselves, has started to try to get together an effort to secure added revenue from FedEx to help deal with some of this type of stuff. And there's no one that's going to argue with you that added revenue is fantastic, more revenue per stop is great, and all that. But looking at the environment that things are out there, instead of trying to put all your eggs in one basket and hoping that that's going to happen, there may be some other steps to take as you move through this and go forward that way. First and foremost is really looking to improve operational efficiency. One of the things that's going to be a theme you'll hear me talk about more in the next few minutes is that we've seen that FedEx Ground continues to use that really as a barometer to judge efficiency of CSPs and things like that. So if we kind of dig a little deeper, the big thing that's on a lot of people's mind, of course, is the momentum to get 50 cents a stop for P&D going to happen? And there's no way to deny that there aren't tough conditions out there now, but just because the conditions are tough, it's also tougher on the FedEx side. So it may not be reason alone just to justify that they blanketly provide added revenue. They may provide relief, and it could be in different ways. You know, recently this past weekend, the end of last week, the word sprung out that they're looking to redefine some of the Sunday zip codes they're serving and curtail some service to those. So that may affect some of you, and some of you it may not. But to start to understand from the FedEx perspective a little bit, I want to take a look at their financials, and they just completed fiscal year 2022 at the end of May. And so if we kind of go back and place the 50 cents a stop enhancement over 2022's numbers, what does that look like? How big of an impact is that to FedEx? How much money it's really being talked about? So just as these pop up, you'll see the column with the red boxes in it is the end of 2022's numbers. You can see, especially if you look at the operating margin, 8% for 2022. For fiscal year 21, it was 10.5%. And that drop into single digits is a big thing from the FedEx perspective. Also on there, before we move to the next sheet, you can see that currently they're averaging for 2022 almost 10 million packages a day. And if we flip over to the next slide. So I want to take the FedEx information that we have, and we also went back and pulled what the average contractor's performance was for FY22 as well, so that we're comparing apples to apples. And when I say average contractor, this is what the average is. So I'm sure maybe very few of you are on the call today that are at this average number. Some of you are going to be above, some of you are going to maybe below, but this is what the average that existed for 2022. You got 1.87 packages per stop. The average route was doing 95 stops. Average hours on road for that driver was a little over 6 hours. They were paid $180 a day roughly, and the average revenue per stop was at $3.65. So if we start to take that information and use it, we know that, again, they were at 9.9 million, almost 10 million packages a day, which would equate to approximately 5.3 million stops a day. And if we take that and then go by our revenue per stop, that would mean it would cost another $2.6 million a day in delivery fees that added 50 cents, or annually well over $688 million. And it's really important to note from a, however they look at it, that's really from a non-revenue generating type of expense. There's not going to be any more revenue coming from that. That's just an added expense. So that sometimes is an important point to remember. So how they're going to look at it on a much bigger picture, you can see that change alone would have added 2.33% in expense and would have reduced their margin from 8% to under 5.9%. And kind of a key thing to remember, in addition to the 50 cents a stop talk and emphasis that's out there, there was also a 20 cents a mile line haul enhancement as well. That wasn't even included in there, but if it were, obviously that's going to even have a bigger impact. And seeing where one person had suggested that alone may be worth another % off the margin. So those are huge things that they're going to consider as they look at all of these type of things. And again, remembering that 21, they had a 10.3% margin, excuse me, and now you're looking at it going under 6, potentially under 5. That's a big concern, that how they look at what they've expressed as a priority in improving their margin. And then you match that with what UPS did at 10.9%, and it starts to negatively affect a lot of things they're going to want to do, because if you're a stockholder or somebody wanting to invest and you've got company A and company B, and one's got a 10.9% margin, the other's got 5%, it could affect investments, which affects capital expenses and gets them in a negative spiral that way. So that's some of how they look at it. And if we can take a look at the next slide.
Well, Mr. Wade, can I throw something in here for a second?
Please do.
The brand new CEO FedEx Services has committed to Wall Street that he will fix the margin problem. Now, Mr. Wade just explained to us that by doling out another 50 cents a stop or whatever the number is, without any increased revenue or anything coming from that extra 50 cents a stop, that's going to reduce the margins further. You need to ask yourself, you think they're going to do that? I know you think they need to, but do you really think they're going to do that? Okay.
So, and again, how FedEx is going to look at this, again, Jeff was just mentioning some of the statements, and that's right on point with the last several quarters. When they've given their earnings reviews and things like that, you start to hear very much a quote was, "We will be laser focused on our margins." After the end of FY22, they even said they plan to sweat their assets to obtain acceptable performance. I think in this term, they're considering you as part of their assets. They've also blanketly made promises that they will improve the margin, especially in comparison to UPS. And so that's the pressure they're feeling. I know you're feeling it. And, you know, if you can get to 50 cents a stop, I think that's great. And I'd be happy for you. But they may do other things instead of that. So, you know, be prepared and also start to look at other things. And in the background of this, you know, this most recent request for some relief from FedEx, twice this year, there's already been campaigns to try to call attention to this and get FedEx to acknowledge it. And there's been very little response from that. And, you know, sometimes FedEx says a lot when they don't say anything, and they may not respond to this at all either. So there's that to consider as well. And that's really kind of one of the points we wanted to make here. So for you, what are maybe some prudent things to do? First of all, you know, some type of relief from FedEx, whether it's the full 50 cents, if it's another amount, if they go to some way to determine which operations they feel may be more in need or warrant relief, however they may do something like that, look for other ways to still improve your own efficiency. And that way, whatever FedEx would give you as any relief, it's a bonus. But don't, again, I think it would be prudent to not wait until November with all your eggs in that basket of thinking we're going to get a, you know, per stop increase, and then it doesn't happen. It could be very problematic. If it does happen, it's great, and that's another bonus, and you just keep on moving with it with your increased efficiency. So to start with, you know, what type of contingency plan do you start to look at? Are you someone who's, you know, who may be able to get a renegotiation? Is that part of what you need to look at? And let's kind of take a few steps forward in the next slide and look at those. So if we want to look at the possibility of renegotiation, one thing that in our efforts with renegotiations we've seen over and over, the stronger your driver on-road hours are, the greater your likelihood is that you can get a renegotiation. So the first thing really is, do you understand where you're currently at with the average on-road hours for your drivers? And again, if we look below that, remember our average contractor results for FY22, and in particular, the on-road hours of the average contractor was just a little over 6. And why this gets FedEx's attention, with 6.6 hours on 6.06 hours on road, FedEx looks at that, and what they see with those type of numbers is they see an asset that's a vehicle and driver that's really underutilized in their vantage point. They start to look favorably when that number gets around 8 hours and grows from there. We've seen a lot of folks that have gone with the 410 type of schedules where their drivers are starting to get up to 8.5 hours on road, and they seem to be doing pretty well with getting renegotiations. So that's where FedEx seems to look at. If there's one common denominator so far we've been able to seem to tie things to, that's what they seem to look at. So that's why the question earlier, the first step really is understanding where you're at on that scale. So let's take a look and see with that average, or whatever the average contractor results would be for 2022, what this would look like financially. So we'll do the before and after with the 50-cent stop increase. But if you see there, the average contractor, remember, was doing 95 stops. So at the current 365 a stop, that vehicle would bring in revenue of $346 a day. With a driver pay of 180, that means the labor is coming in at 52% of that revenue amount. And as a benchmark, 45% or so is usually where you want to strive to be at or better than. But if we take that same operation and take the same 95 stops, and let's say he gets that 50 cents a stop increase, that will then take the revenue per vehicle up to $394. But it still puts him at about 46% of revenue as far as labor. And, that can be debatable whether or not even the 50 cents a stop would be enough for some contractors. The revenue increase per truck in that case with the 50 cents would be $47.50 there. If you were in the case where you've got a driver or drivers that on road at 8.5 hours, financial impact be a little bit more like this. Your 8.5 hours on road and get you 132 stops by the driver. Those 132 stops at the current or FY22 365 a stop will generate $482 in revenue for the vehicle and actually puts the labor at 37%. That would also net out to be an increase of $135 revenue generated by the truck. And if you're thinking, well, my driver doesn't work that many hours now, if I get them up to 8.5 hours on the road, they're going to say, pay me more. Even if you increase their pay to $200 a day, that would still only put your labor at about 41% of revenue. So it's something to look at, I think, and something we feel that this kind of helps warrant, why it can actually be more beneficial than the 50 cents a stop, or in conjunction with it, if you get it, even greater. Can we take a look at the next slide?
Hey, Gary, can I kind of add there?
Yeah.
And this is something that people have implemented across the network. Is it tough to get enough work on all of your trucks? It might be, and that would be somewhere where you'd have to look at a large package route, even though I'm not a big fan of those. And then you always have to ask yourself, are these trucks really full, or is the driver just cubing the back out and not seeing the rest? But as I said, where I live here in Ohio, the CSP actually works as drivers 312s. So they're always doing anywhere from 150 to 250 stops a day. So will it fit for all of your routes? Maybe not, but once again, what little steps can I take, and how do I control what I can control? Sorry about that, Gary.
No, that's okay. And you're very right. I mean, like the large package route and things like that, you also have to look at it that maybe that large package route will free up some of your routes so they can do more than 132 stops, but it still brings you to an average, let's say. So that's what you're looking at each route individually, but you're also looking at what does it do to the average for your business.
Hey, Mr. Wade.
Yes.
This is exactly what Fedex is looking at. This is it, you guys. This is exactly it. If they pay more per stop, that's not going to fix the problem. That's not the problem. That, as they see it, that's not the problem. Problem is we have underutilized resources, and as long as they think that that's the case, and come up with whatever math you want, but as long as they think that's the case, then they're not going to just go across the board and give stop increases. Not going to happen.
So, and just to kind of clearly underline what we're talking about here, the 8.5 hour, you're netting, $135 more revenue per truck than currently what the average is showing. But that also, even if you got the 50 cents a raise, would still net you $87 more per revenue per vehicle than with the 50 cent raise. So if, looking to increase the efficiency of hours on road for your driver, we feel has a much better long range solution for you. And if there was any one thing, I guess I would tell you to look at now, it's, what can you do to get more work on your trucks. That's really because just, that's what's going to keep the drivers on road long enough to make it worthwhile. I mean, we saw the average contractors drivers were on road a little over 6 hours a day in 2022. They're actually also on duty just a little over 7.5 hours. So, and what that's saying is obviously that people aren't, they aren't even working a full 8 hours for what they may be earning or getting like that. So, but that's part of the logic and why FedEx is focusing in on that. What's the average on-road hours per driver? So we'll take a look at the next slide. This is just another way of looking at it. And if you look at it this way, the orange line on this graph is if that average contractor got the 50 cents a stop raise, but they did not change the hours the driver ran, because I think that's a lot of the thought that FedEx may have is, if there is an increase, does it change other things, or do you just get the same performance? It's just, at a higher rate. So that orange line represents that the hours stayed the same at 6.06. It'd be a little under $400 a truck in revenue. The blue line is at the old or current for 2022, 365 a stop. If the average hours a driver was on road, that's the revenue that would be generated by the truck. And so you can see right at about 7 hours on road, or a little more, it's the break-even point. And even just by doing more hours on road, it doesn't have to be 8.5. You start to generate more revenue off of your truck than just getting the 50 cents and not doing anything else. And so I think that's if everything to the right of that, the orange and blue line intersection is really almost opportunity revenue for you, if you want to look at it that way. So you may not be able to get 8.5 hours on road, or 8 or 7. Can you get 7.75? Because that's still going to be, more revenue that way for you. And then, like I said, if you do, and that number even goes up even higher if there is some type of rate increase done by FedEx. So this is, you don't have to look at this like it's a either or. I mean, you can do this and still reap the benefit if there is a increase per stop like that. But you also have taken some action in case there isn't. You've tried and improved your position. So, and another way FedEx looks at this, that average contractor is about 15 routes. So if we want to look at it this way, the average guy's out there, 15 routes, 95 stops a route. They're going to do a little over 1,400 and change stops a day. If their driver's on road 8.5 hours a day, they're going to go up to 132 stops. If we now take that 132 stops into the 1,400 and change they're doing a day, it brings the need for routes down to 10.7 or 11. So that's a savings of 4 trucks or routes to go on road. And that's what the number that flashes in FedEx's face. That's what they see like that. That's almost a third of the average, if you want to call it that, CSP's fleet may not be needed on road. And that's where they see some of that. So that's why I say if the average contractor a little over 6 hours a day requested a renegotiation, it's probably going to be denied. And that's pretty much what the experience everyone seems to be having that's in that range. So again, that's why that number is something to look at. I'm trying to beat a dead horse, but it's an indicator. So FedEx, we don't know whether they will offer any added compensation. It may take a different view, or it may take a different result than what's being asked. There certainly has been some movement with the fact that you've seen the Sunday service changes going in effect. But again, the largest gains that can be made are really with your on-road hours with your driver. And the market that you're in right now, the economy that you're in right now, your growth is stagnant or negative. And any business, when they hit those cycles, they look to operational efficiency to try to lead them through it to maintain or improve their financial results. And that really, one of the indicators for you for operational efficiency, again, is that on-road hours per driver. And whereas again, in the uniqueness of your model with FedEx, they can't tell you how to run or staff your business. But what they can do, and they do, is they influence how you do things by how they structure certain aspects of your contract. And in this case, revenue being one, where they will reach a limit. Maybe they're at it, maybe they're not. Like again, they may give some type of concession here, but at some point they're going to stop funding if people just say we need more money without having something to back it up. Now, you know, you may be struggling, our average contractor here may be struggling with 6 hours a day on road per driver, but unfortunately, they're not going to be able to call attention to the other valid reasons they have as to why they might need to renegotiate, because FedEx isn't going to really probably get past that 6 hours a day on road per driver. They may get it up, their contract may be poorly written, and they may get it up to the point to where it says they're at 8 hours a day or something like that, but they still are struggling. But unfortunately, they're not going to be able to prove that case to FedEx until they get it up to that 8 hours, and then they can show them they're struggling and get a renegotiation. So that's, I want to thank everybody for their time today. And if we have any questions, if you want to talk about them now, we can do them now, or wait till the end if you'd like.
Well, we'll get to some questions here in a minute. I don't have a slide for this, but Ms. Carey, if you're on here, if you could just give us there are renegotiations going on right now, and probably the best indicator of what's to come is probably from what's happening currently in renegotiation. So let's ask Carey, if are you seeing FedEx just give folks more money?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there are many negotiations going on right now. As far as increases go, I'd have to say that it's very minimal, and the structures of the contract include that advanced service fee amount, which is 1% of the gross revenue of the MESOs. And you have an opportunity to either take that money up front and choose a MESO, or work the money into a traditional negotiation. And what I'm seeing is with the minimal, and when I say minimal, about 0 to 3% increase, sometimes the best thing to do would be work that advanced service fee into a negotiation and structure or restructure the contract to best suit your CSA needs. That's probably the best advice I can give right now as far as choosing one of the offers. It totally depends on each CSA's unique characteristics and what is the definition of their area, as far as, some areas are seeing growth, and MESO number 3 would be the best fit for them. When I do the analysis, I have data, settlement data to go from, so I can make a very good educated analysis on how you have been doing on your current contract with your actual settlements, and applying that data to each of the MESO offers to see if it is an increase and which one would best suit your company. I get surprising results, and a new aspect I've been adding in is not only taking the amount of data I have, which would be ultimately the whole year, the whole time you're on your current contract, but also taking a little snippet or snapshot of more recent settlements. For example, if I took last week's settlement and laid it into each of those offers, what would the results be compared to your current contract? So again, each CSA is different, your needs are different, and you know, it's best to do an analysis, whether it be me or yourself, if you feel you can accomplish that, and do what is best for your company. Try to restructure the contract and the amount of money that you're being offered to best suit your individual needs.
Okay, great, but it doesn't look like they're just saying, here, have some more.
Throwing money. No, absolutely not.
So that would be a good indicator that they were going to do it. So there's some questions in here. Let's see if we can get to them here. Hang on a second. Technical difficulty. Question.
You want me to read them, Jeff?
Here, I finally got it. It says, you are not considering the contractors are not able to continue given the inflation recession. I don't know. It says, Ken, you want to answer this one? I will. Anyways, it says, if those contractors fail, then packages don't get delivered. There's no question about that. Thus, FedEx will lose customers and money. There are numbers being used to back this up. This is just some of what I have heard. So
I can give an example. So, I mean, I think one thing that's happening now that some of you may or may not be aware of, I think in terminals, they're starting to have conversations with contractors, and this is nothing new, that they feel are stable about people that may not be stable. I spoke to in depth with one person last week who's in that very situation. He was asking me some questions about a new operation that he's been approached to take over and how to deal with some structural things with that. He doesn't want the person that's in it to fail, but I think they're getting their own contingency plans in place. I think they do. I think they've always planned there's going to be some churn of people that don't make it, unfortunately. So that, you know, from a very impersonal way, I think that's part of how FedEx looks at it. I didn't mean to jump in your way, Jeff.
no, that's okay. There's a couple other things here too, and these aren't necessarily direct answers to this question, but there are. We have the brokerage side of the house too, and we're seeing just as many people interested in getting into this business now as ever. It's not, that hasn't dried up. In fact, it might be increasing as other businesses out there start to fail. This is actually a business that you can, you know, it's pretty much, the cash flow is pretty much guaranteed. Now, we can argue all day if it's enough, but at least there is some versus some other businesses that are drying up to nothing. And let me foreshadow something else. They do have, I don't want to get too deep in this right now, but they do have, we talked about Network 2.0. There are a whole slew of things that are on the horizon that will help this situation for sure. And if they know that, you know, they're going to try to do the best they can with what's going on right now. The thing in Dallas last week, and Ken already said it, is control what you can control. For now, that's really the most important thing. So will some folks fail? Yes. Are they failing? Yes. Are there others behind them to come pick up the slack? There are. Will they do any good? That's to be determined on every single person. It's just a rough time. So let's see. A couple other questions here. FedEx can raise the cost of ship, which can then pass along to contractors, which would not hurt their margins. So they think they do pass along the fuel surcharge. And there's another argument we can have. There's a bunch of arguments there. you know, they can increase revenue in different ways. Why don't they pass that along to contractors? Keep in
Their
mind,
rates,
FedEx,
their base rates have always mirrored UPS's,
Mhm.
always.
But keep in mind that you guys have a business relationship. So FedEx views contractors as vendors. So if your tire vendor came to you and said, hey, I can't change your tires anymore because I can't afford it or whatever, I don't know, you might be a nice person and shell out an extra $10 per tire replacement or something like that. You could. The tire vendor, the difference here, the tire vendor can up their charges to you, their price for performing their service. There's something, you know, that your tire vendor could do. But in general, if FedEx is viewing you as a vendor, they're not necessarily going to just say, oh, sorry, we'll pay you some more. Should they pass along extra charges that they can get from their customers? We would all hope that they would, but remember what their mission is right now. The FedEx's margins are not as good as UPS's right now, and that is unheard of. That's their mission. So keep that in mind. That's the backdrop to everything. It says, second question, how do you think FedEx network will function when such high percentage of contractors selling walk away or failing? Guys, people have sold, walked away, and failed before. Is the percentage higher now? Maybe. Probably. Will they get through it? Yes. Those of us been around this whole thing for 30 years. We've actually seen this before. Not maybe to this extent because it's getting pretty bad, but it's happened before, and don't think that they don't plan on getting through it. Okay, how do you implement a 410 schedule on a 7-day operation, along with a 5-day commercial bulk route? Is that a Mr. Wade question there?
Yeah, I think Chris, we'll have Bob reach out with you. We can definitely help you with that. It can be done, and not all routes are going to be on that 410 schedule. That, you know, the bulk truck might be a 5x8, and that, you know, so. But that is something we could work through with engineering and scheduling, and Bob will be reaching out to you, Chris.
And hey, can I add one thing to that as well?
Absolutely.
A lot of times, like in the example of the average contractor, there was like 15 routes, and we said that they could cut out 4 routes by having their drivers take 8.5 hours of work on road. It's not that, oh my gosh, now we'll have to fire 4 drivers, or I need to let 4 people go. So one of the beauties of the 410 schedule is that the basic 410 schedule is 5 people covering 4 routes, so that you have a rotating day off, and there are just lots of benefits that your staff sees out of that. Most of the people that have converted to those find that, one, their turnover goes way down, their drivers are happier, they're not having to give them days off to go to the doctor because they have a day off already once during the week that rotates through, and then they get long weekends every few weeks depending on which type of schedule they're on. So there are a lot of positives to it that really work out that way. And oh, by the way, it's not just 4 routes less you're using, you actually have less trucks. So therefore there's less cost in that it wasn't shown in any of those numbers.
Okay. Next question here or comment, that's assuming load quality is acceptable, which is completely not the case. Yes, load quality. You're not going to get any argument from any of us that load quality is an issue for sure. Ken, you want to say something? Okay, why do you only count on-road hours? I have guys that have to hand load trucks 30 minutes or so, or sort times changing make it 9 or so hours of time they are at work.
Well, one part of the answer to that is that that on-road hours are the only things that they can be consistently measured, just for the very reasons mentioned there, that there may be unique situations in certain locations to where it's not really comparing apples to apples, that someone may have to load off belt versus being on a belt, things like that. So that's one of the reasons why, if you have a very extremely unique situation, I think Ken would probably say that would probably fall into some of the unique characteristics that would be discussed when negotiations come around.
How will getting rid of Sunday services affect CSPs? Is this different for rural routes? You guys, some people are saying, well, FedEx ditched I talked to the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Someone said, looks like they ditched Sunday routes because of somebody's demands. I can guarantee you that it had nothing to do with somebody putting a video up on YouTube, the reason they ditched Sundays in some places. For sure, it has a cost saving of some sort effect for FedEx. It didn't have anything to do that. But how will it affect CSPs? Hopefully you won't lose as much money on Sundays as a lot of people do. And that volume then can be moved over to Monday, which would make Mondays more productive.
And one thing I could add on there, having worked in the express side, any area where express is servicing with 10:30 service during the weekdays, you're going to still have Sunday service there. That's not going to go away, I'm pretty certain. It's only the far out rural things where there's high mileage and maybe 20 stops, that type of thing. The vast majority of the Sunday routes, Sunday areas, are still going to service, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Next one here. Biggest part of their margin issue is the 7-day service reduces their margin. Yeah. Uses versus UPS providing 6 days. Yep. That's what we do. Yep. Okay. Oh, dear Lord. I don't know if we want to answer this one. Just kidding you there, Mr. McGee. If FedEx's margins are their main concern and all their base rates mirror UPS, then why are they still chasing Amazon's business model? UPS figured out shipping tires and extra large packages and changed policy to reflect what they realized was unprofitable. Sunday delivery has always been a losing proposition to both X. No, that's correct. So actually, FedEx isn't chasing Amazon's business model. Amazon still primarily, even though they've done some different things here recently, they still want to ship an oven mitt from a warehouse to your front door. The oven mitt costs 25 cents. The cost to get it from the Amazon warehouse to your front door was probably $20. So that business model doesn't work. Amazon has lost a fortune trying to deliver their packages. Really, they make money building the technical infrastructure that everybody else buys, us included, that supports their fulfillment business. That business, the delivery part of their operation, hasn't made money forever. So it's not necessarily chasing the Amazon business model. And I'm not sure about the tires and stuff. But I will tell you this: you talk about tires and incompatibles. That, if anything, folks, that is the most legitimate. I mean, not that a lot of concerns aren't legitimate, but for sure the obvious, easy, legitimate thing is they charge a premium for tires and heavy packages and large stuff. That premium, a lot of that premium, that could be passed along to the it could and should be passed along to the contractor, because those things take way more effort to do, and instead they just pay the package charge. That's no good. Well, you deliver envelopes, then we pay for those. No, that's not going to get it. Here's a question. How does FedEx determine on-road hours?
You want me to handle that, Jeff?
Sure.
Yeah, and this is, you got to make sure your drivers are putting in accurate information. Because quite frankly, it goes from the time they do their first stop to the time that they do their last stop. So if you really want to accurately record your hours, make sure that your drivers are putting the right on-road hours in the scanner, and I wouldn't have them do the end of the day until they got back to the terminal. So if you're getting gypped out of your stem time as on-road hours, which it is, make sure your drivers are properly recording when their first stop is done and when their last stop is done.
Yeah. And I'd say if you think that they are doing it right, look real close at it, because we see this data all the time and it's very inaccurate. Very frequent. FedEx has not addressed the quality of the job at all. The job is much harder now than it was 2 years ago, for example. Packages are bigger and lower quality of loading makes it more stressful on the drivers and on the drivers and asking for more money. Is this something we can use in a renegotiation because the job is harder? Yes. There's always been heavy packages. There's always been large packages. There's always been buckets. There's always been tires. Is there more of them? Are there more of them now? I don't know. FedEx's margins aren't indicating that there are. Otherwise, their margins would be better than they are. As far as, that's a good, the real question there is how do they calculate the percent, the large package percent? That if they would, so what should happen is you would want them to show you how they came up with that number, because there are certain areas, industrial areas, that kind of thing, where I don't know that those are accurate. I mean, that would be the thing. First of all, to use it in a negotiation, you would have to be able to prove that, you've got 25% large packages or something like that. That would be the first thing. I would want them to show me how they came up with that number. Good luck getting that one. FXG is giving away premium services on Sunday delivery of stuff that isn't due till Thursday. Sure what that means, Mr. D. Maybe we ought to talk offline. Okay. Be careful regarding extended hours for drivers. It can cause safety issues, especially during high heat or when daylight becomes less. I've cut my W's workers' comp substantially by closely monitoring driver hours. The trade-off for lessening hours or lessening labor costs can be offset, or more than offset, if incidents go up due to fatigue and poor operating conditions later in the day, early evening. So we're just going to say, look at your typical UPS driver. How long do they work every day? Is it hot out there for them? Yes. Do they have some of the same troubles? Yes. Do they have better load quality? I don't know. Maybe. Just actually watching your driver's hours, wait till you see what's about to happen come contracting 2.0. Just going to give you a little hint there. FedEx having worse margins than UPS, but UPS is union and pays 2 to 3 times for their drivers. How is that possible? Because their drivers they have higher productivity standards than FedEx ground contractor drivers. So Mr. Wade showed you that the average drivers on road, what would you say, Mr. Wade, 6.2 hours or something like that?
Just a little over 6.
Versus the average UPS drivers on road well in excess of 8.5 hours. So what that means is they generate more revenue than a FedEx ground driver does. What's that, Ken? Someone? That's how that's possible. That's how that works. I have drivers that average 25 stops an hour and deliver over 135 stops. We are loading from the ground on a recent overlap to a terminal. Yet they claimed through negotiation that I can be more efficient. By the way, drivers, I guess that means my drivers average 6.5 road hours a day. So that must be a very dense area or apartments or something like that. That's cool. But
And once again, the drivers are on the road 6.5 hours. If they were on the road 7.5 hours, you would be doing 25 more stops or 160 stops per driver day. And then just at the average revenue of just say $3.65, it's significant. Once again, that's going to be FedEx's argument. Your drivers are on the road 6.5 hours.
Absolutely going to be I mean, we used to, it's not just a bunch of guys sitting in an air-conditioned office telling you to get the drivers to work longer. We get it. We all get it. We've been there. We've been managing drivers, managing package handlers, you name it. And we understand that side of it. But when it gets to what's happening now, again, inflation is increasing your costs. Recession is making your volumes shrink, if nothing else, remain stagnant in most cases. FedEx isn't going to come to the rescue with a 50% or 50 cent a stop increase. And actually, Mr. Wade just showed you that that's not actually going to solve the problem if it's not accompanied by a productivity increase. This is what it means. This is the hard time. This is the big leagues now. This is when you got to step up. If we say, well, my guys are on the road 6.5 hours, good. And they seem to be productive for those 6.5 hours. Good, but what Ken just said, we got to get another hour out of them. Well, I can't ask them to do that because that's being mean. They'll quit me. Well, they can go to UPS, and UPS will keep them on the road 8.5 hours a day. And they won't put up with 6.5 hours. They won't. I have been doing this since 2007. I have one of the best contracts in the country, I feel. I have a mixture of density and rural, not super far out. Rural but good 45-minute drive from the station. This is a typical 2019 summer, but what we have never seen is $7. Yeah, that's true. $7 a gallon gas. It's all fuel related. Everything else is snowballing from that. Yeah, I'd agree with that too. There hasn't. That's another thing that people they're reporting, if they're reporting 9-10% inflation, 11 something on the PPI side, folks, it's worse than that. You guys know. Way worse than that. And yes, it's a problem. But again, FedEx is hanging their hat on the on-road hours. Until that gets, and that's the thing about when we do our renegotiation business reviews and see if it's possible for you to request a renegotiation. That is the number one first thing that gets looked at, and they're not going to budge off that. Now, if you can show that the folks are out there, enough on-road hours, I believe that there's been some success with that, because then I don't think they have an argument anymore. As long as you can show the folks that they're working, you're utilizing your resources best you can. I think they have to address that issue. Hard enough to get people in this labor environment. Getting them to move to 9 or 10 hours may be more difficult. No question about that. But guess what? Other jobs out there are starting to disappear. You at least have something to offer the folks, a steady paycheck. You'll see. It didn't used to be like it is now. Everybody, well, it's so hard to find folks. Yeah, absolutely it is. Recruiting is one of the toughest things still out there, but slowly but surely it's starting to change. That's the only good thing about a recession is it changes the labor market. It takes a while. Nobody said any of this was easy. This is some hard stuff here. You're right about you are right about UPS drivers working longer hours and are more productive, but they are compensated higher. That's correct. They are able to hire, I guess it means hire drivers with better capability due to higher compensation. One of the examples Mr. Wade just showed us is if you increased the on-road hours, you could afford to pay the folks more. Is that what you're going to say, Mr. Wade?
Well, actually, I was going to say, an example I've seen, one day watching, it just so happened to be a perfect storm since we're using that analogy today. A UPS driver and a ground driver pulled up at the same time. The ground driver made one delivery. The UPS driver made a delivery to the same house, one across the street and one next door, and pulled away before the ground driver did. And the package size was no, there weren't tires or anything, they were just normal packages. And if you think the ground driver was getting paid $15 an hour, in reality, in relation to the number of stops they're doing, he's paid more than a UPS driver, because UPS driver was making $35 or $37 an hour, I think, at the time. And so who's really providing a better value? So there's something to that fact about how difficult UPS manages people. I mean, they create a very tough environment to work in. I don't think anybody that's ever had any dealings with them would say anything else.
One of the things that's the toughest thing to do to justify, I think, right now, especially in your mind, is in times like these, investing in training both BCs and drivers, but especially BCs actually at this point. That's probably the last thing you think you can afford right now. Oh, I can't afford to send somebody to training. No, that's no good. I don't have the money for that, but whatever. That's actually the very best thing you could do right now as far as looking for ways to increase efficiency and productivity would be to invest in your leadership and your management staff. And I know everybody's out there rolling their eyes. Oh, geez, we can't do that right now. You have to, because making those drivers more efficient and productive is the key here. Amount of packages is the same. How much can you beat down a driver? I don't think anybody's asking to beat them down. We're just asking them, you're just asking them to work a full day. What's wrong with that? Oh, you don't know, Jeff. They'll quit me. They'll yell at me. Actually, I do know. I've been there many, 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 many times. Oh, here we go. Large package percent has gone up because the denominator has changed in the overall delivery. Boxes are larger. Added to that, the increase in them doesn't seem to be that much. But until you take into consideration that the boxes are a lot larger, therefore requiring more trucks to deliver in the same area, you have no argument for me about the large package thing. I think that's probably I already said it. That's the greatest area of opportunity. If I were going to complain to anybody or request getting paid more, it would be absolutely for that. Those packages. The premium on those packages is tremendous, and what they're paying you guys is highway robbery. If we are packing out our trucks and doing 200 stops in 5 to 6 hours because of how dense our routes are, how do we get the drivers to stay out longer? Send them back to the terminal to pick up a second run. Okay, there's two things there. Have you ever been in a mall parking lot or anywhere where you see one UPS truck backed up to the other? Now, I don't know, it could be a breakdown, could be something, but when you see it day after day, that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking more stops out to the folks. But I'll tell you what, when you get the contracting 2.0, these things are going to change, and you're going to see a whole bunch of different things here. This might solve itself.
One thing, can I add something about that?
Sure.
One thing is, I mean, is that person being paid by the hour? So therefore you're not paying them a full day's pay for, or what's considered a full day's pay for not a full day's work. And secondly, if that truck is utilized again later in the day, so that you're putting that asset to work again, that way that will help your cost structure as well. If people share trucks, it's possible. If you have pickup routes or things like that, those are some other ways that you may be able to work around it to make it efficient, since it sounds like it's in a very dense area.
Hey, Mr. Wade, what if you started utilizing your truck 16 to 18 hours a day?
That would help a great deal. You know, my analogy, McDonald's buildings aren't open from 11 to 1 serving lunch. They're open almost 24 hours a day. You're paying for
Giving
that
you
truck
some
all
hints.
day long.
Right, we're giving you some hints, folks, about the thing that's coming. You think you've seen some changes in the last 7, 8, 10 years? You ain't seen nothing yet. FedEx paid contractors to be able to treat their employees and pay them anywhere close to UPS. Okay, so it's pay, right? If I told you it's not pay, it's leadership, you're probably going to sit there and say, no, that's not it. Well,
Remember, they're settling with you for performing the job. So once again, if you improve your revenue per dispatch, then you can pay the driver. Your guiding light is 45%. So if you've got drivers that can produce $450 worth of revenue as a team, then you can pay $200 a day.
Why doesn't FedEx change from First Advantage to someone else? Where can we get our drivers approved faster? You may be careful what you wish for there, Mark. All I'm going to say about that for now. Just be careful what you wish for. Now we have to train drivers. UPS, Amazon will be looking forward to hire those well-trained drivers at our expense. No incentive. So if you train them, you think they're going to go someplace else? The statistics would.
What's the cost of not training your drivers?
They're just going to go to UPS and Amazon. I want to train them. Oop, here we go. So there is a point of diminishing returns on running a truck 16 hours a day. Slavery ended 160 years ago. Where do we find these people? I'm not telling you you're going to have one driver in the truck for 16 hours. How about 3 of them over a 16-hour period? You will see. And we've gone over time. We want to thank you for showing up, asking a lot of good questions. And I think we'll go ahead and see you next week, same time.